Welcome back to another edition of the Edge podcast. Publisher Brenden Slaughter here for BeaversEdge.com, joined by the Beavers Edge crew. We've got senior writer Ryan Harlan and writer Brogan Slaughter joining us here on the podcast. We're going to be previewing Oregon State versus Florida State in the Super Regional round. Big baseball weekend at Goss this last weekend as Oregon State came back and won the Corvallis Regional to earn their place in the Super Regional. We'll be gearing up and talking about that matchup a little bit later and be catching up with a writer from the Florida State side to get some thoughts on Florida State as well. So definitely looking forward to that conversation here in a little bit. But guys, what a weekend of baseball. Ryan, let's just start with you, man. There was a lot of games and a lot of days, and I'll admit I wasn't the most optimistic after Friday night when Dylan Delvecchio, who, by the way, I'll say, gave a nod for all regional pitcher, man, because I thought he pitched a tremendous game despite Oregon State swinging at stuff out of the zone. I think he just played a great game on Friday, and I wasn't too optimistic, but man, a fire got lit somehow, some way, and that team rattled off elimination win after elimination win. Started with 7-2 win over TCU, smacked St. Mary's, smacked USC once, and then smacked USC again. Just Ryan, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on the weekend? Crazy one.
Oh yeah, no, and like you could see the light switch moment for this team kind of from Friday to Saturday and then carrying that over into Monday, ultimately winning against USC to even get to this point, to get to a super regional. I mean, Mitch said it, and then also too, Trent also said it as well. Like Mitch said after Friday that, yeah, we weren't playing loose. We were playing kind of tight. The expectations were really high, and I think he was like, I think guys kind of fed into that a little bit. And you can kind of tell that this was the team that, wasn't really like themselves at all in that Friday game. And you credit to Delvecchio for the game that he pitched, of course. Like he basically said as much like, we know what this kind of team is, and we're going to throw a lot of breaking balls, a lot of off-speed pitches their way, try and get them off balance. They're a really good fastball hitting team. But Trent said too, after that elimination game in the bracket started, he was like, we're our backs are up against the wall, and it's our ability to go out there, play loose, and go hit and play ball. Like that's really what it was, and you could just see it in terms of the energy that the dugout had, and also too just the way that guys were playing, guys being at the plate, the way that they were approaching each and every pitching staff that they faced, seeing St. Mary's again for the second time, and then even too the rattling off the Sunday night win in the nightcap against USC, and then being able to win the way that they did on Monday against USC as well too, where it's like you saw them win in two different ways. They can beat you by small ball, or they can they can go the long ball, and they did both. So that's something there where I just think this team is now being able to put together the most complete performance at the right time when you need it the most, and that's in the postseason.
Yeah, a lot of great points there. And I think the most impressive to me, Ryan, is for Oregon State fans, obviously Oregon State's baseball history is very in the modern era, right? Like you don't have to be too old to remember '06, '07, obviously, and then '18. Except for maybe our young rider to the left was a little young during those first couple of runs.
Just a bit.
Yep, definitely remember having the little guy around the house around those times. But all jokes aside, it's one of those things, Ryan, where we had never seen Oregon State run through the losers bracket in a regional format. We've seen them do it in Omaha in '06 and '18, where they lost first game in Omaha and did just what we saw. But as far as in the Corvallis Regional, they had never put themselves in that position, and at least not in the modern era, since the regionals expanded '99, all those things. So I think it's particularly telling about this team that they were able to find and dig deep and find that so early in the postseason. And Brogan, I'm curious your thoughts. I mean, it seems to me like now, like baseball is such a game of momentum, and obviously you want to be peaking at the right time. They look like whatever kind of broke them Friday against St. Mary's, they look like a freight train rolling downhill. I mean, they've scored, what was it, 47, 48 runs, Ryan?
Almost 50, yeah.
Yeah,
It's like,
over,
yeah.
yeah, and like that's an absurd number compared to what we saw on the whole. So, do you think they're just peaking and getting hot at the right time, Brogan?
Right. And the two games against USC, I don't know what that run differential was, maybe like 34 to
A
5
lot.
or something like that. It was pretty crazy. But you're definitely getting hot at the right time, especially dudes like Trent Caraway, where you're already breaking the Oregon State postseason home run record just in the regional, not even
Yep.
counting this series against Florida and potentially Omaha. And I think the big difference, like we said earlier, and we've written about, is the crowd getting into it. Like that first St. Mary's start, Eric Segura, he got rattled, hit a couple guys, walked a couple guys, and it took the crowd out of it. And it just momentum, he was swaying back and forth, knocked in a couple runs that game, but you still lose 6-4. But, you go to this first game against TCU, you got reruns in the first inning. USC, you start off that game, couple runs in the first inning. So just scoring early, getting your pitcher to set 3 down early like Dax did in his start, it just gets the crowd into it. And I don't think they've looked back since. That's how helped him roll through the rest of the regional.
It's been impressive. And like you said, I mean, Ryan, you were at that game Friday. You kind of mentioned in your kind of analysis since that St. Mary's kind of punched him in the mouth early, the way that they did, kind of took the crowd out of it. I would argue that was kind of the only time all weekend the crowd wasn't really into it. And we have to, realize, call a spade, fellas. Oregon State is better when they have that Goss crowd. That's why getting a national seed is so important. That's why the importance of, despite, I think on paper, this being a tremendous super regional matchup between two very evenly matched teams, you have to give the narrowest of odds to Oregon State because Oregon State's not going to Tallahassee. Tallahassee is coming to Corvallis. And, like we've discussed and talked about, Ryan's wrote about as well, technically, as far as the furthest point in the continental United States you can go would be if, like, I think the math has been done on this. It would be like the Washington Huskies having to play the Miami Hurricanes. As far as pure miles, that's it. So when you think Tallahassee, little bit more inland, or Corvallis, little bit more south, you shave off, a few miles, but you're still talking almost 3,000 miles. You're leaving the humidity. You're coming to, a much different climate. As Ryan mentioned, the big thing, the ball travels so much differently in this air compared to down there. The parks are different. Goss plays different compared to Mike Martin Field. And I think perhaps the biggest, Ryan, you've talked about the time change and, how that can affect a team as well. And, turning around, playing quickly on Friday. They are traveling today. I do think, that, and as you mentioned, Corvallis is not an easy place to get to when you're coming. Like, I remember very interestingly, 3 years ago, Ryan, it was a big deal when Auburn had to stay in Wilsonville, Brogan. They were staying in Wilsonville and bussing down because there was no hotel space. So I'm not saying that's the case for Florida State, but I also don't know for certain where they are staying. And, they didn't know with Oregon State in the losers bracket if they would be hosting. So I'm very curious to kind of get some details when we catch up with our writer from the Osceola here in a little bit, some details on that. But how do you think, Ryan, you just being an East Coast guy and knowing a little bit about coming west, how do you think they'll handle that? And more food for thought, they had one West Coast trip all year. They played a 3-game series in Berkeley.
Oh, okay.
Took 2 or 3 from Cal, obviously ACC opponent. It's
Yeah.
weird to say that now, but only one West Coast swing all year.
Yeah, so I grew up in Virginia, and like I've made that trek both ways of from Virginia to Corvallis. I live now in Corvallis, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. But the time zone change takes a lot out of you,
Yeah.
and like it's very much like a different. If you're so used to being in a routine, like I know baseball players are, like Trent Caraway was saying, like, hey, look, like my whole like walk up into the batter's box, like that's part of the routine that gets me ready in
Right.
there, like the leg kick and everything. I just do that. I started doing that, and it's been part of it since. So that's gonna be something that's gonna probably, I would say, play a small role in there. And I mean, if they're traveling today too, like that's not much time to adjust to it. I remember coming out here the first time and being like, it just like thrown off by the whole time change deal, being
Yeah.
3 hours behind, and it was
Do you
it was
think
a really
it's
weird it was a really weird feeling.
yeah?
Like I'm not
Do you
gonna
think
lie,
it's
it was
do
really
you
weird.
yeah? Do you think it's harder to go ahead or behind in time in this particular
Um,
case?
I would say both are hard, but
Okay.
the hardest I would say is going probably behind.
Okay.
If I,
Yeah.
at least in my experience, it's always been
Sure.
kind of going behind, but it's even worse when you go back. But that's, I think, after when you've been acclimated to the time
Sure.
zone that you're currently in. But I think for this and the kind of how travel's going to be for them, I think the going behind part is going to be probably a little harder than normal
Yeah,
for
it's
most people.
again, I'm just curious because obviously, Ryan, you've had the East Coast kind of experience, and I can only say I've only been to Florida a couple times, and each time when I came back, I have what Ryan was talking just. I wouldn't just say jet lag, but you just feel very different, especially when you're there long enough to get adjusted to it. Just kind of some final thoughts on the regional as we'll kind of wrap up thoughts and take a break and get ready to bring on Curt from the from our sister side at Florida State. But Brogan, just kind of some final thoughts from you. Overall, like what's just your confidence level in this team going into the super regionals now that you've seen what you've seen? I mean, baseball, as they said on the broadcast all weekend, I agree wholeheartedly with. Baseball does not care what you did the game before. It's one of those things where it's unpredictable, and I think that's what makes the postseason so great. I think that's why you see teams like Murray State in the super regional round.
Racers.
No disrespect to the Racers, John Morant's finest, but it's just interesting, and you see Vanderbilt not come out of their regional, and LSU get pushed to the limit by a losing record Little Rock team. I mean, baseball is just baseball. So I'm just curious, how do you think the team will ride this postseason? And maybe compared to last year, they had to take this and go on the road, go to Kentucky. Now it flips and they win their regional and don't have to go anywhere.
Yeah, man, I was rooting for Little Rock to take down LSU. I'm not gonna lie, I just wanted that to happen. But shout out Sawyer Stroh Snyder, Caden Aoki, Eddie Magical. They took the other regional honors from those three teams. But outside of that, we pretty much swept it. Trent Carraway, he got regional MVP. It's
Yes.
showing you that it's not one guy, it's not two guys, it's not even three guys. We got top to bottom of the lineup, pitchers, starting and relief. They're all firing on all cylinders right now. They're all in a good spot, I think, especially for this next series. And like you were saying earlier, with Florida State being a really comparable team and maybe even a better team on any given day, the difference should be who has to travel, who gets to play in front of their home fans in the area that they've just had one of their better winning streaks of the season right now. So I
Right.
think the home field advantage is going to be a huge, huge factor.
I mean, for sure, and it's not guaranteed. I mean, we saw it, Ryan, 3 years ago.
Hmm.
Auburn, same thing. We could have made all the
Yep.
same travel, all the same everything that we're talking about right now. And Auburn, and they've got a great program down there, and I was very impressed with their, like we talked about, they had to bus an hour and a half to get down to the games and all these things, and they came in and took care of business. And that's the first time Oregon State had been beaten at home in a super regional format. So the numbers are on Oregon State's side, and I think that's going to be, a benefit. And I think Mitch Canham and his staff will remember that. And ironically, Ryan, I think Joey Munt was on. He must have been the only player on that team. I think. I don't want to say for sure that there was nobody else, but considering that was 2022, I think he might be the only player. Just off the top of my head.
Yeah, at least for what Gavin was saying, it was like about hosting a super at home. This is the first one for him
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
so I think either
Joey, of
Joey,
course, we know was there.
yeah, Joey's I think your safe bet,
Yeah,
pretty
for sure.
much.
But
I'm trying to scour through. I'm like, who else?
yeah,
Uh,
I might be missing somebody,
probably,
but
yeah, I
yeah,
can't
just
off the top of my head.
yeah, no, but just and last point I want to make too, because I think we talked about Dax, we talked about Kleinschmidt, and what they were able to bring. But Ryan, also talk a little bit about James DeCremer and what he was able to bring. I don't think a lot of Beaver fans were maybe familiar with his game, so to speak, but he showed up and delivered a big time performance when they needed a bullpen guy to start and give them good innings. I don't think a lot of Beaver fans saw that coming. Just what does that show that Mitch Canham and Rich Dorman had the confidence to go to him in that spot?
James, I've heard a lot of good things about James DeCramer, kind of like going into this season, he was a name that I was told to look out for in
Sure.
the pitching
Okay.
staff. Like he's a guy when you are able to build him up enough that he can be a good high quality arm out of the bullpen and be able to be probably either in a weekend rotation or your midweek guy. And at least in his case, like coming off of back surgery too, which is like the most impressive thing imaginable. But like for him, like DeCramer just kept guys off balance. I mean, pitched 5 innings, a season high 71 pitches, only gave up 2 hits and issued 2 walks. Like, dude was filling up the strike zone. Like, DeCramer is basically just going out there kind of in that similar mindset of like Whitney and Kleinschmidt of being like,
Right.
hey, look, like the moment's not too big for me. Like, we have our guys doing our thing. Like, I'm able to go out there and get punch outs and just being able to get ground balls out as well too. Like, his stuff is nasty to hit.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like like Dax is nasty to hit. Kleinschmidt's stuff is nasty to hit. Eric Segura when he's on, his stuff is also nasty
Right.
to hit. But it's like DeCramer can give you that too, and in 5 innings of work, it was basically where they wanted to get him at, and you know, I think for Beaver fans, like, you know, if you need to bring DeCramer in for a possible game 3, right? Like, I'd be comfortable riding him most
Right.
of the way. Like, you built him up pretty good in terms of pitch count, and I mean 71 pitches in 5 innings, like. Yeah, if he's a guy that you know you can rely on to be kind of a fireman kind of role, get in there quickly as possible, limit some damage. You know, like I think that's pretty solid. And for him to be in that role and not let the moment get too big, you give credit where credit's
Absolutely.
due in that regard, and that says a lot about how Dorman and Canham like approach going to this bullpen and figuring out who they can go to, because even today, Canham was saying like there are multiple guys on our pitching staff who want the ball and want to be able to basically have it in their hands to be like, look, I'm going to go out there, do what I can, help us win games. And DeCramer's one of them. And I think DeCramer probably shows up on a possible game 3.
Yeah,
So
it's entirely possible. Last thing I want to mention before we take a break and bring on our writer from the Osceola, Brogan. We mentioned the small ball, and Ryan did as well. How cool is it to see? And I think Beaver fans really appreciated. Like, it was shades of like Pat Casey seeing the small ball taken out there, and I think it kind of, that's kind of been Oregon State's secret sauce when they've won their championships, is the ability to do that. Not saying you need to do it all the time, but how cool is it to see them just like take the will out of that sequence and be like, oh, here's our first sucker punch right at you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, going back to what Ryan said, just a tad. I think I watched James's only other start in the season, whether it was Portland or Gonzaga. I don't quite remember, but he looked good then. He looked great in that USC game. And I think having him come in as a bullpen guy instead of starting the game is going to be really, really great for us as a whole. But for me, the small ball reminded me of my guy, Stephen Kwan, Cleveland Guardian. I feel like he'd always start the game off with the bunt, get on there, which I think we're looking at. Easton Talt is kind of doing that right now. I think we got the guys who the ego isn't there. They don't care if they got to be the guy. AJ Singer, lay down a bunt, move a guy over, advance a runner. That's a positive at bat. I think guys are willing to do that. I think Greg Swindell, whoever we had on play-by-play, was astonished on ESPN watching us lay down 2 or 3 in a row, move guys over. Wilson Weber, Dallas Macias with some of the slides of the weekend in the home and third base. But small ball will kill you. It'll demoralize you. You're thinking home runs here and there, especially from guys like Turley and Arquette. You kind of flip the script on them, and they don't know what to do. It kind of breaks them down.
And I must say it too. And Ryan had some good tweets from the game itself, and it was fun. It was just so much fun to see that, and it was one of those things where it just really talked about Oregon State feeling confident in themselves, and I think at the end of the day, that's a huge and big thing as well. So we'll go ahead and take a quick break here on the Edge podcast. When we come back, we'll be catching up with Florida State and talking a little bit more about the Seminoles. You've got the Edge podcast. Welcome back back to the Edge podcast. Appreciate everyone tuning in to this edition as we're previewing the Super Regional, Oregon State versus Florida State. Pleased to have on from the Osceola over in Florida State, our sister site for the Rivals.com network, Curt Weiler on the program. Curt, pleased to have you on. Thanks for coming on with us via the time change and everything else. How are things in Tallahassee, my friend?
They're good. It's all good down here. I think people are happy that this program, they feel like, is back where it belongs in a second straight Super Regional, trying to go to a second straight Omaha trip.
Absolutely. And, just want to dive into the matchup a little bit. We obviously knew this was a potential pairing when selection show came down, and it turned out to be, Oregon State got the 8th spot, Florida got the 9th spot. And why it may not seem to maybe the casual baseball fan that distinction was sizable, it is, in the sense that it meant home field advantage for Oregon State over Florida State. Just curious your thoughts and the team's thoughts kind of on that just right off the bat.
I think, honestly, I don't think Florida State was thinking they had done enough to be a top 8. They weren't really projected. They were projected more in the 12-11 range. It felt like I felt like maybe they were 1 or 2 wins. They played UNC 4 times in the last 2 weekends. They just won one of them. That kind of felt like their chance to lock up a top 8, to maybe take Oregon State's top 8. It might have come down to that. They didn't do it. So I don't think they were expecting a top 8 going into the day. I think the 9 being that close obviously makes it frustrating. And I think Oregon State definitely teased Florida State fans a little, losing that first game and having to sweat it out in the losers bracket of the regional. I think there was some hope of, last year, actually, Florida State was 8 last year, but they didn't play the 9 because Oklahoma lost their home regional. So I think there was some hope of, especially after Friday played out, but obviously Oregon State really ran through those next 4 games in impressive fashion. And so now it's a cross-country trip.
Yeah, I'm curious, just kind of following up on that a little bit. Florida State kind of cruised through their regional for the most part, not nearly as much drama, easy 3, relatively from looking on paper, easy 3 wins. What did you kind of see from them in the regionals, and did it kind of carry on from what you saw, from the regular season?
I saw a team that 2 years in a row now has kind of hosted a regional and been about their business. Link Jarrett's teams are big on. He is not the most boisterous guy. He's not the guy you might see like some other coaches at other spots in the country that kind of get attention for how they act sometimes, but he's a guy who is about his business and gets his teams properly motivated, and they respond well. And I think that just felt like what it was. I don't think they had the toughest 2 seed in Northeastern. They came in on that winning streak, but watching them, they pretty quickly it showed, I think, that they had been on a 27-game winning streak, but that was because of the competition.
Right.
To a degree, they'd been playing. They never actually played Florida State. Florida State played Mississippi State, the 3 seed, twice. And I think that team was quite good. They had some high-level arms, a really good lineup that I thought Florida State did a great job of limiting. I think they held them to 5 runs in 2 games. Coming into the year, Link thought that this team was going to be built on run prevention with athletic defense and with just the number of arms they're going to throw on the mound. And I think that was exactly how the weekend played out. They were error-free the entire regional, allowed just 7 runs. Bullpen had 9 combined shutout innings. It was very much what you were looking for in a chaotic weekend. The chaos never really got to Tallahassee.
Ryan, Brogan?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, for speaking of that, those arms in the bullpen, I know there are a lot of left-handed pitchers in that bullpen, especially to Jamie Arnold as well, the Friday night guy. I guess like for it's no secret for Oregon State in particular that they're have had a tough time of hitting against left-handed pitchers. There's some success that they had against Iowa, but like, tell me kind of more about what Jamie Arnold brings on the mound, at least kind of his arm slot. Like what kind of arsenal is he working with out there, and kind of is he going to be the guy for Friday to open up game 1?
Yeah, we can get to, I guess, we're still unsure how they're going to align their rotation. Jamie has rounded out his game. Last year was kind of the breakout season where he went from a guy with potential to, he kind of ended the year as, is this a 1-1 pick in the 2025 MLB draft? He kind of had to come back for the junior season. He wasn't sophomore draft eligible, but he really had a breakout season with, honestly, mainly 2 pitches. He's got a nasty wipeout slider and then a fastball, but because of, you talked a little, he's a 3/4 arm slot that, like, it is not a fastball that's easy to square up because it has a lot of movement. It even sometimes moves up, which is like, you don't see fastballs do that a lot, but because it's coming from lower, it's not an overhand slot. It definitely is a unique to fastballs. This year, I mean, he's added a changeup. He's mixed in a cutter. I think he's even had a fifth pitch sometimes. He's really tried to round out his arsenal. To me, it's felt like, I mean, he went through a patch. It's got to be hard to imagine dealing with the pressure he's dealing with of knowing, like, he's had the Nationals GM, who they have the number one pick, at multiple of his starts. Like, the pressure that comes with that's kind of hard for any of us to imagine, but he's really been coming to his own, I feel like, down the stretch, and is coming off probably his best start of the season last week on Saturday against Mississippi State. With that, I mean, when you're only guaranteed 2 games in a format like this, you would imagine that Jamie will go game one. He's been their best option, but you'd be moving him up a day, because they had Joey Vellini throw the opening game, the Saturday starter last week on Friday, and had Jamie on Saturday. So with this being a Friday through Sunday, because it's on the left side of the bracket, I wonder. I would think they'll move Jamie up a day, but because it just feels like, I mean, game one is so important in that best of three, and that, you would think you want to put your best foot forward, and that is Jamie.
Just
No,
kind of
totally.
looking at these other two, Wes Mendez and Joey Vellini. Which one do you kind of lean towards for that game to start when it gets to that point?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you would be moving Wes up a day, because Wes through Sunday he closed out. But if you're talking about who the two of that have been in the best form down the stretch of the season when you're only guaranteed, I would think that's Wes Mendez. I mean, Wes was unbelievable against Mississippi State. He's probably thrown more innings this year. He's up to like 75, 77 innings than probably the last 2 or 3 years combined in the seasons. He didn't throw a ton last year at Ole Miss. And in high school, he was a two-way, so he wasn't like a consistent pitcher who was doing that all the time. He's thrown a lot, and it felt like early, like in the midway point of the year, he kind of went through the rough patch where it looked like, wow, he's looking like he's thrown more innings than he ever has. But the last 4 or 5 at times out, he has been, I would say, their second best starter. That's not a huge indictment on Joey Vellini. Joey Vellini hasn't been bad, but Joey Vellini just hasn't been as sharp, where Wes feels like he's pitching now as well as he has all season. He threw a career high 8 innings in that closing out game against Mississippi State. And I think they're all lefties, but they all do different things. It's not you're facing the same pitcher 3 times type thing, for sure. I mean, his changeup was really on against Mississippi State, and that's when that pitch is going, that changes things for Wes. But if it was me, I would probably go Jamie West. But by doing that, you're bumping both guys up a day. And I'm curious if that's what they do, or if they maybe keep the status quo of what they had.
Catching up with Curt Weiler from the Osceola here on the Edge podcast. Curt, appreciate your time. Couple more things for you. One thing that stands out, kind of looking at Florida State's schedule, and something you and I have kind of discussed a little bit in our question swap, is Florida State, like many teams, in the South, played a lot of home games this year, and only came out to the West Coast just one time for that series against Cal and Berkeley. I'm just curious your thoughts on them having to make that trek, and even just from what we know, getting to Berkeley is a lot easier than getting to Corvallis. And we talked about it a little bit earlier on the podcast. I'm curious kind of what you've heard as far as Florida State and their travel arrangements, considering that they thought they could even host until much later, because we know the story very famously 3 years ago when Auburn came up here for a Super Regional. They had to stay an hour and 15 minutes away from Corvallis because of the lack of hotel space. So I'm just kind of curious what you've kind of heard about Florida State coming out here.
I think they're traveling today, maybe as we speak. I believe they're traveling out today on Wednesday. I haven't heard kind of details. I haven't heard how far away the hotel or anything like that is. I mean, it's something they deal with to a degree in Tallahassee when other people come. Tallahassee, a little bit bigger than Corvallis, not a ton. It's not, it is another college first city, kind of, along with, I guess, being a state capital. But it's I think it definitely helps having done it once. I mean, a lot of years they wouldn't have done anything close to this until this year, really, when you added Cal and you added Stanford to the ACC. There wouldn't have been a West Coast trip in the cards. And I mean, if you take that out, the furthest trip they took was probably Louisville. So having done it once probably helps matters, but it's I think definitely a thing that's easier in planning it than in practice and doing it. And I think it'll be curious how but they did it, I think 4 weeks ago. It was second to last week of the regular season, would be 4 weeks ago. So I think they definitely have a plan, and Link is incredibly detail oriented, and he'll definitely have all that ironed out. And I wouldn't be surprised if they were already, I'm sure, making plans for the trip even before they knew for sure they were making it.
As somebody that's a former East Coaster myself, I know what that trip is like, having to do it both ways. So I know that's definitely not fun, albeit I traveled from Virginia to Corvallis, and there's no direct flight in between. So clearly know what that's like. And I know they're going to have probably a pretty short time frame to try and get used to that time zone change again, albeit 4 weeks, since they last went over to the West Coast.
Yeah, if I had to bet, I'm sure they've got a charter as the postseason. They're not flying like we're flying, but it doesn't make it any easier in some ways. And I would imagine they've been prepping for the time. And like obviously, Friday won't be too bad. 6 p.m. East Coast time. It's earlier out there. The interesting one is Saturday. It's 9 p.m. But I mean, I know these guys are I'm sure they're keeping those kind of hours, and it's probably not too hard. I mean, they're often up plenty late at games, so it's just a couple hours, but it's interesting.
Yeah, so just kind of flipping and looking at this lineup, Florida State, you guys have 4 hitters with 16 or more home runs on the year. One of those being Alex Lodi's hitting just a hair over 400, which is impressive in its own right, and looks like was just a Golden Spikes finalist. So just give us some insight on the lineup and some of the sluggers that Oregon State's going to see this weekend.
Yeah, they've got a pretty, I would say, a pretty deep lineup. A lineup capable of guys who can take care of mistake pitches. Link's big on the alternating of not letting you get in the groove of a bunch of righties or a bunch of lefties. I mean, they've been DH kind of splitting a lefty and a righty to really add to that balance, and they're not lacking in options there. Alex definitely. I mean, Alex has been he flipped a switch kind of after maybe not the best start last year. He transferred in from UNF. And now year 2, I mean, he has just been consistently consistent. It's been something to behold. I think he became, what was the stat? I think he became the first player, it was against Florida in Jacksonville, in major college or pro baseball history to hit a walk-off grand slam to complete a cycle. He did that to beat Florida in Jacksonville. It's if you haven't seen the clip, it's a moment. But I mean, that's been him all year. I mean, he's hitting 405. But I think he might be hitting even better than 405 with runners in scoring position. I mean, he is that type of guy who you want up in the situations. He's coming off probably his worst weekend of the season. He only had 2 hits in the regional, and yet still they did what they did because, I mean, you've got a Max Williams who has 18 homers. You've got a Miles Bailey who's the freshman. He's a local kid from Tallahassee, actually, who has grown tremendously over the course of the season, had homered in 5 straight games before not homering on Sunday, and he's just got, I mean, the 80th of 80 grade power. He misses balls that go out for homers is kind of what you'll hear people say about him, and he regularly breaks TrackMan with how hard and how well he can hit the ball. I think, I mean, when you go, Gage Harrelson's a guy who's setting the tone there. But then you go Cal Fisher, you got Drew Farreau, who's a switch hitter with power from both sides of the plate. I mean, I did the math, actually, I think, for the questions I sent you, Brenden. They lost 94 homers off last year's team that hit 131 homers, was a program record, and they've got 100 this year going into this weekend. So, I mean, Link Jarrett's quite a hitting coach. That's his track record. He takes a heavy role in that, even as the head coach. And I think this has been one of his more impressive coaching jobs with how much production they replaced off last year's team. And there really hasn't been a huge drop-off in the offensive numbers.
It's impressive to hear about those offensive numbers. I'm just kind of curious, Curt, how does Florida State's ballpark play? Is it kind of a hitter-friendly park? Is it more of a pitcher? Like, just in the context of those numbers.
There are a lot of parks in the ACC that are a lot smaller. It is not by any means like I mean, Clemson kind of has a no launching pad. Wake Forest kind of has a no launching pad. They have a short porch to right. It's a little further in, has a taller fence you got to clear for the homer, but out to center, out to left center, and to left, like you've got to get a hold of the ball. It is not the parks you see where like you sometimes think the power numbers are boosted by the park they're playing in by any means.
Sure, and I just had to make mention of it because I'm sure you know as well in the South there are teams who have designed their parks to
Yeah,
definitely be
yeah.
a little bit more friendly to the long ball for sure. Catching up with Curt Weiler from the Osceola here on the Edge podcast. You know, Curt, when I love that we are in a point in just odds and betting that now you get lines for baseball and lines for Omaha and those kind of things. And I found it interesting that, specifically for this series, I think Oregon State opened up as the slightest of favorites. Now Florida State has moved into a slight favorite, but both teams minus on the money. Like it is right there. I mean, is there, other than maybe Auburn, Coastal Carolina, which I'm pretty intrigued in too. This might be the most and maybe North Carolina, Arizona, but this might be the most intriguing super regional matchup on paper. I'm curious your thoughts, just as odds makers seem to see it very tight.
I think that's what you're seeing and hearing from the people who cover the sport, at the national level. I think this was an intriguing series when it was the matchup if both teams can win their regional, and now that it comes, I think very much, yeah. I think I said in the questions I sent you a bit ago, I really could see either team sweeping or either team winning in three. I kind of see any outcome on the table, and that to me speaks that the high level talent of both teams, that where one team could maybe just take over, and I think that could happen either way. But also, this could be a real back and forth barn burner that all three games are in dramatic fashion. So I think that absolutely checks out. I think a thing I'm curious about with Oregon State and the schedule they played is, how did that schedule prepare them for this level of the postseason? It's kind of the unknown.
Yeah, it's definitely, curious, and obviously I said, yeah, we'll be informing your readers here with our responses coming back here this afternoon as soon as we get this podcast up. But yeah, I mean, just kind of some last thoughts, obviously, from you, Ryan, just kind of on the matchup itself, and obviously, Curt, you just kind of mentioned, how you see the series shaking out, kind of just last thoughts from the panel, guys.
I was gonna say, like, looking at the stats and kind of a general, like cursory glance through, it's a really tight matchup. And yeah, like Curt was saying, I think this can go either way. These teams are almost kind of similarly constructed, but I know Florida State's not a small ball kind of team in terms of their lineup and the power that they have in there. Beavers have shown that they can make that work, but I think it's really like you're gonna have to play for both teams the most mistake-free baseball that you can play, because I think if the opportunity happens to make a mistake for either team, it's like you're gonna get Florida State or Oregon State to pounce on that right away. And like the Beavers saw it in the first game where like they had Eric Segura kind of go out there, look a little erratic, and then just couldn't be able to get back into form, and then breeze through the losers bracket to win the regional in the end. But for them to do that, that was more of like, hey, we need to get out to a fast start. We need to do it quickly, and they've been able to do that. I mean, in the two games that they had on Sunday, it was a lot of runs, jumping out to those leads early, and for Oregon State in the two matchups against USC, it was, hey, we're going to win this game two different ways, and you're not going to stop us. We're going to physically impose our will on you, both on the mound and at the plate, and did just that. So I think it's going to be one of those type of slugfest games where it's going to be an either or kind of matchup.
It's definitely shaping up to be an awesome weekend of baseball at Goss. And Curt, I really appreciate your time coming on the podcast and answering some questions and getting all the fans ready for the matchup. Obviously, you can find Curt's work at the Osceola, our sister site, Florida State, on the Rivals Network. Curt, appreciate your time. And thanks again for doing the question swap too. Again, you'll see his stuff at BeaversEdge.com, and you'll see mine over at the Osceola. Appreciate your time, and enjoy the baseball this weekend, my friend.
Thanks, guys. Wish I could be there in person.
All right, so that'll go ahead and wrap up this edition of the Edge podcast. Appreciate Curt Weiler joining on this edition. For Ryan Harlan and Brogan Slaughter, this is Brenden Slaughter signing off.